whoever one starts. Mona, Sharif, Ahmed, Aaron, you guys don't even need me. I'm just gonna hear like a figurehead. And I think Mona is lost.
No, I'm with you guys.
Okay,
okay, I'm gonna start. Okay. Okay, so my name is Mona, and I'm currently based in Naples, Palestine. I'm an assistant professor at Al-Najah National University. So I work in the computer engineering department, and we're working inside the university on improving the AI. So finally, we just opened a master's program for AI at the university. This is one of the things I'm involved in. Beside the university and academic field, I'm also highly involved in the startup ecosystem in Palestine. I myself have 2 startups, and I've been also giving consultations for startups. So AI is my world. What I'm focusing on in AI is how we integrate AI with educational systems. So I've been working since 2014 on a personalized learning environment in which we want to enhance the virtual learning environments to take into consideration the students' characteristics. This is my work, and this is me. Thank you.
You're welcome. So from the left of the corner, we have Kais.
Yeah. So hi everyone, I'm Qais. I'm currently the co-founder of Arabot and the chief data scientist. I started previously in academia. I used to be a professor at Princess Sumaya University. Basically at Arabot, we're working to teach the machine to understand language. So natural language processing, text understanding, and our focus is in dialect Arabic. Because there is the official Arabic or the modern standard Arabic that no one knows and no one uses. And there is 22 different main dialects. Even in big countries like Saudi Arabia, you'll find like different sub-dialects. So this is our main focus. And using the natural language processing, we build the chatbots to help enterprises improve their customer experience.
Perfect. So before moving to Kieno, I have a very funny story to talk about the dialects.
Yeah.
So I'm Turkish. I moved to Saudi, and before I moved to Saudi, I started learning Arabic. I thought I started learning Arabic online. So I started learning Arabic. I had no idea I was learning the Egyptian dialect, and Sharif will laugh his butt off on this. So the first week of work in Saudi, in Jeddah, in King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, I went to the office and I say, ازيك Habibi, and everybody is floored. For those who don't know Arabic, like it's the same thing, but it's not appropriate to say at all. So I was culturally completely clueless, and like my friends made fun of me so much. Out of my 3 years in Saudi, I did not learn any Arabic because of that. So I really hope you can get actually everything sorted out in the language learning and everything else going forward. So thanks for that one. So going to Kieno, great background. Where is that?
That is Cape Town. That's where I am at the moment.
Perfect.
It's where I'm based. Yeah, I'm a chief strategy officer for a company called I. We have an office in London, a much bigger operation in South Africa as well. And you know, I don't know. I mean, only recently I found out what Python looks like. But you know, I come at AI from a different perspective, from the human perspective. And so I've been a broadcaster. I've been broadcasting for the last 30 years, commercial radio, television, worked for NBC New York as well.
I thought I heard you somewhere.
No, I don't know.
Okay.
Not now with the current president there, but I mean, but I've taken an interest in entrepreneurship for the longest time. And, you know, through the years, done a bit of studies, did some work at MIT on artificial intelligence. And my interest there was specifically how to deploy artificial intelligence into human systems, businesses, society. And that is from where I come. You know, I understand what happens with AI. I understand things like syntactic parsing and all the other fancy stuff that gets used. But for me, my main interest is how do you effectively deploy an AI system, ML, NLP, into a human system, gaining trust when you go into a particular business or in whichever situation you're deploying that. So at I mean, it's a company that started out just doing general consulting. You know, we do app development, we do web development, all the normal stuff.
Yeah.
And when I came on board, I said, what we need to do is we need to actually help create our own innovations and also help our customers innovate. And what we do essentially is we use design thinking to start the process. Before you spend the money on the build, we use design thinking to develop the innovation. And then when we get to that solution stage, we then have
you build the product.
40 coders and we build the product. Yeah. So that's in a nutshell, really.
Perfect.
Amazing.
Good job. So going from that, I'll go to Aaron, who is looking for good opportunities and everywhere on the planet. So Aaron.
Not really.
Not really. I know.
So hi guys, my name is Aaron. I'm with the Catalyst Fund, and we back inclusive fintech across emerging markets. So we have companies spanning from Uruguay to Uganda to Sri Lanka. However,
and that's not the whole world, huh?
No, I mean we have none in Russia. That's one thing. But yeah, so we back about 10 to 15 a year. Typically at sort of seed stage. And we're specifically interested in how technology can deliver financial services to sort of the underserved right now. And I think AI is a very big part of that to optimize decision-making, delivering credit scores, and allowing interaction interfaces where there weren't before. And yeah, unfortunately, right now, our universe is even smaller. So in Fund 2, we're only investing in Mexico, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and India. Hopefully that changes in Fund 3, but yeah, we kind of go back and forth on that. But yeah, excited to be here and explore this a bit more.
Same. Glad you're with us. So Ahmad will start pitching immediately what he does. So I'm just going to ask him not to ask for funds live. You can ask him later. So Ahmad.
Well, that life's ended. I luckily don't have to ask for funding anymore. But so. My background and maybe why Ozan was saying that was I originally started a company called Riskopy a few years ago. We were focused on helping customers understand supplier and organizational risks. So it's a big problem. You're a large enterprise. You have 100,000 suppliers. Good luck trying to do some due diligence on 100,000 suppliers or getting some risk scores on them. We eventually got acquired by Coupa, where I work today. Coupa is the leading business spend management software. So on the Coupa network, as of last year, there were over 5 million suppliers. I think we're probably getting closer to 6 or so. And we help very large companies like, Amazon and Procter and Gamble and,
whoever is who.
Yeah, procure with their suppliers, receive invoices, but also do supplier risk, payments, and all kinds of stuff. I currently work in payments. And so throughout my journey at Coupa, we've employed a lot of AI and ML technologies to help either assist us as a company, provide services for our customers, or technologies that are for our customers to help them with their business. So I'm currently there as one of the product managers, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
So when you were building the initial company, did you pitch to Sharif? Did he decline investing in you?
No. I did pitch to Sharif. Never declined. The timings didn't work out. We got acquired as we were raising a fund.
That would have been the fastest acquisition from investment, Sharif. You missed that one.
It's actually a funny story because we were on track to invest, and then last time I saw the next time I saw him, he said, "I don't feel comfortable taking your investment." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because we're in acquisition talks now." So, like, all right, cool. Too early, but also too late at the same time.
Yeah. Oh God, that's how timing is. If you were using AI prediction models, maybe it could have helped, man.
Yeah.
I think what happened to us, I did not predict myself, so it was a funny turn of events. But yeah, it would have been a great pleasure to have worked with Sharif on a deeper capacity.
Well, he's building a new fund, so maybe next time when you're out of being a product manager, it could work. So Sharif, tell us what you're up to. Tell us what you've done. So we met like 2015 back when I was in San Francisco, I think. And then,
yes, exactly. So the quick background is I grew up in Los Angeles, went to UCLA and graduated with neuroscience degree, and then started tech companies in the mid 90s with website.com being one of the first ones, and then went through the boom and bust, sold it for scraps, and then built again and again. Ran a few different types of companies, mostly around consumer internet, commerce. We built over 100 web systems for other companies and got tired of building for other people and said, why aren't we building our own products? Built a video encoding technology company before Google Video and YouTube launched, because we knew that it's very difficult for normal people to share video. It wasn't as easy as pictures. A little ahead of its time, but we raised money and had a couple pilot customers, and then some other stuff happened to the company, so it didn't end up going anywhere. But I dabbled with a few mobile things, and it was WAP at the time. We didn't have big screens in color and HTML5 yet, so we were building WAP websites, which were really whack. Fast forward a little bit, a friend of mine started a mobile ad network called AdMob up in the Bay Area, got funded by Sequoia and Excel and others. So I jumped from LA to the Bay Area about 13 years ago, and spent the rest of my career there. First AdMob, which got acquired by Google, and then rested at Google for 7 years almost. And then while I was at the end of that period, that's when we started meeting. I had a lot of paternity leave, so I took trips to the region with Google for Entrepreneurs and a nonprofit called Demaidi. And I kind of got hooked. I mean, we went to 4 countries on the first trip, and I was just blown away. I was like, whoa, there's people here in business and entrepreneurs and founders, and like all this whole tech vibe is spreading around the world, as you guys know. And so I couldn't stop thinking about it when I'd get back to my desk in Mountain View, and eventually found the path to do more than just mentorship by writing checks. The founders I spoke to said that it was severely lacking in the region. It's not just the capital itself, but the understanding and mentality around building startups. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. So on these trips, like when I met you, I met my partner Hassan and Dave McClure from 500, and they said, hey, why don't we raise the first US fund for the MENA region? 6 months later, I finally convinced my boss that I could leave, and ended up
convinced your wife that you can move.
Well, we didn't move yet for a couple more years after, but yeah, first I had to like take 2 quarters just to transition out of Google, and then joined full-time 2017. In May, we launched the fund, and it ended up being a $33 million fund. It's fully deployed now as of earlier this year, Q2. And so now we are, like the news that you heard last week, we are leaving the 500 network, and we're launching our own independent brand and independent fund for our second fund. And I can't speak more about the details about that for regulatory reasons, but it's going to be very exciting. So,
do you at least have picked a name?
We have. That will be coming out on Monday next week.
Come on. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I can't tell you that, from our first fund, we did about 180. We did 180 companies, investments, and follow-ons into some of those. And it's, I think the movement has really started in the region the last few weeks. We're excited about the next phase, the post-COVID phase, I guess, because a lot of stuff, as you guys have probably seen, a lot of funds are changing, and the country mandates are changing. Technology has certainly been catalyzed now because of COVID. Everybody, the wider audience, I think, sees the value proposition of technology. And so that kind of creates a little bit more wind under our wings, because you kind of felt like you were doing this whole thing in a bubble before, so you talk to your friends and they're like, what's venture capital? Like, who's a startup? And you're like, yeah, this super hot startup, everyone's talking about it, and nobody knows, right? So like, even all these events we do, I mean, they're kind of
like you're talking to yourself, like, am I really talking to myself?
Yeah, so the hope is that it's going to become a little bit more mainstream, post there's also the Kareem acquisition that kind of went mainstream, and now we've seen family offices and corporates and everything. Hey, what's this technology stuff you guys are talking about? So it's good. It's been a fun ride.
So in the panel, it's really a different mix of people who are practitioners and building startups, who are investing in startups, who are doing research and product development. So I'll start with the guys who are doing product more, like Kais and Kieno. Like, where do you guys have seen the transition of or maturity level of AI-based startups going? Like, do people take AI as a serious product offering, or are they still looking into it as like a magic? What do you guys think?
Yeah, so actually we had both. Like in early days, we started 2016, and I think 2016, like 70–80% of the time, we were trying to tell our customers or our ecosystem what's a chatbot, why does conversational AI matters, why does automation, messaging system, all of it matters, and in the early days, everyone some expected black magic, not any magic, black magic. You know, like I remember having a discussion that someone wanted the chatbots to understand the intent without any user text. So like mind reading. So yeah, but some of the like the people who like really benefited from AI early on, like we're running we designed running one of the biggest chatbots in the world, around 9 million users. So this is huge. They had like normal expectations. Woo! Yeah, they had normal expectation in the early days, and they said, okay, we're willing to take a risk, try your stuff, see the reaction. They started with us 2017, so almost 3 years ago. So people with like normal expectation, like I know AI can solve like a big part of my problem, but and people would say like, okay, even if the accuracy today is 80%, we're happy with it. We can always improve in it with more data, more machine learning models. These kind of people got the big win. Like organization with huge expectation of AI, you know, like the kind of general or strong AI, Hollywood AI, like these did not change. Like some of the customers who talked to us 2016 still did not have any success because they had unrealistic expectation. Like really,
yeah, I mean, in that sense, the product, the AI has, for those who understand what it can do realistically, have been able to build products that use AI and facilitate and business value creation.
And save millions of dollars yearly. Yeah.
Perfect. So Kieno, what's your take? Same thing in South Africa?
It's similar, but I think a lot of the reason why we don't see a lot of conversion is because when we speak another language, right? So, and that was something I picked up. I was in The Hague a couple of years ago, and I was just a journalist, just trying to figure out what's happening in the tech scene. And I sat in this room, and we had a whole lot of tech people explaining stuff to me, and I had no cooking clue what we were talking about. I said, hold on, but now what are you doing? What are you solving? It's great that you can do all these fancy stuff, but how are you solving the problem? And that really, as a business, it is our point of departure. So we're doing a couple of things. So for example, you know, as I speak downstairs, we've got one of the mayors of one of the regions up the West Coast chatting to our team at the moment.
You have to go talk to him.
This is a politician. I prefer talking to you.
Okay, then don't talk. Just leave the building. That's much better.
So, you know, crime is a big issue in South Africa, and there are lots of other places where crime is an issue. So they basically launch it with normal license plate recognition cameras. And what we do is we basically deploy our system on a little Jetson Nano. I mean, it's one of the best things around. I mean, you can basically run your neural networks on there, plug it into cameras. We built the models to detect people. We detect certain types of behavior, which could be predictive. So if people, for example, are about to protest, the camera would be able to pick that up. When you've got 1,000 cameras, even if you have 200 people looking at those cameras, not going to work as effectively. So what we do is we work with people who have problems that they want to solve, and we find simple solutions, a lot of it based in AI, to help them solve their problems. So we first ask the question, what is it that you want to solve? Another thing, for example, unemployment, big issue. We didn't start with AI. We've got an app which we'll finish in January called NeighborLink. And we start chatting to the big corporates, and we say to them, you've got offices in clustered neighborhoods. When you purchase, non-core services, where do you purchase it from? A lot of the time they purchase from other big corporates, and the micro enterprises are left out. So we've built a system that allows the big corporate within clustered neighborhoods to manage the relationship between micro enterprises in those neighborhoods, and people who are unemployed are able to upload what their skills are, and we do the matching. We do a lot of other stuff which I won't talk about, enterprise development into those supply chains. But the end goal is to have hundreds of neighborhoods, thousands of neighborhoods with very interesting data points that we can then extract and analyze for whichever reason. So we first start with the solution, and then at the end of the day find out whether or not AI will work.
So, but you need to have a use case to provide the technology into.
Exactly.
Which I think was the same case with Ahmad.
Yes, correct.
So Ahmad, how did you build the modeling, and how are you helping the enterprises currently?
So, it's often a data problem, right? You run into a data problem where you're like, this will take humans way too much time to kind of solve, right? So in our world, it's whether you're trying to assess supplier risk or trying to figure out which supplier you're even dealing with, right? I'll give you an example. If you're looking for the word Apple in a company, there are about 30,000 companies in the world with the word Apple in it, right? So you start off with this like overwhelming problem. You're like, okay, well, I have too much data on my hands to try and sort through it. Let me see if I can form a hypothesis, right? You start off with a big question. Can I form a hypothesis that can, define what I'm trying to solve for? And that's probably more important than the solution itself, because it often steers you towards a northern star, more so than anything. And you go through these experiments of trying to build a model, and whether you succeed or fail. In the large enterprise, that's often quite a big problem, because when you're dealing with large enterprises, data is sometimes unstructured or not clean, and data is complex, and data has a lot of messiness and dirtiness that you have to deal with. So you oftentimes have to work with your customer or many different customers to try and distill down what's important and what's not important. And unlike consumers, it's funny, consumers kind of behave in more predictable patterns.
Yeah.
Businesses all have completely different processes, especially their DNA and their makeup and where they're located can be very different, right? A manufacturing company is going to be completely different than a Facebook or Twitter.
Or a service company or consumer brand.
Or a service company or consulting or an insurance company or banking and regulations come into play. So there's no one size fits all. We really try at Coupa to build things that work with multiple different customers across many different industries for a common pain point and problem. Supplier risk being one of them. Detecting, suspicious spend or suspicious spending or invoicing. Those are problems that every team will face. And so that's how, to answer your question in a little bit of a long way, that's how we are focused on AI and ML technologies for the large enterprise. And it usually starts off with a lot of soul searching and digging into what real problems are common across everyone.
So I'll jump to Mona, because what Ahmed described seems like a very good research topic.
Yeah. To be honest, I like the way that Ahmad and Kieno, they mentioned that, and like we need first to start with the problem, then look at the solutions. We face the same exact problem in research. So like one of the main problems that I'm facing currently with my research is the lack of data itself too. So if we're looking, for example, to solve the transportation problem here in Palestine, we don't have that data. The data we're having is mostly descriptive data in which they give you the percentage of something happening. But we can't actually track the patterns. It's not easy for us. So doing the data collection is taking most of our times here in research. And to be honest, like the hype started here. So people, they started to look more at AI and look more on even data and understanding how we could analyze the data to solve the problems we were facing. But again, we need to have structured data. We have to have good data collection. Up and until now in Palestine, we don't have a platform in which we could look data in different sectors. And that's a huge problem we're facing here. And it's causing us many problems in doing the research itself. So I totally agree with Ahmad and Kieno on what they actually been talking about.
So from a research angle, do you think AI applications are going faster? Maybe this is a question to whoever wants to take it. Like, is the research picking up with how AI is applied in the market and trying to build more sense into this whole world of like applications and AI?
To be honest, I would love to start with that, and it would be great if somebody from the industrial sector could also comment on that. I do believe the research is there, but we still have a huge gap between the research centers and the industrial sector itself. And this is caused by different issues. One of them is the collaboration itself. So our research is much more on actually just doing the publications, focusing on the academic field, and we rarely transfer whatever we're working on into real industries. This is according to my point of view, and I would also love to hear from the private sector what they think about it.
I mean, it's an investment, right? It's a long-term R&D investment on the company side, and it requires companies to realize that they need to invest in this space. Luckily, you know, our company has realized, our company has seen a real problem and realized, well, we need to throw data scientists and engineers at the problem, right? And you won't see the fruits of that labor for quite a while. So it's an investment. I mean, it's an investment on every front. It's an investment for the public sector, for the private sector, and for investors. And I think a lot of investors have definitely fueled some of the AI and ML hype, with not understanding some of the what I like Kais's description as black magic.
Yeah.
But generally, I think it's everyone has to participate and be able to build something here.
So I'll actually ask Sharif on that one, because you probably remember Ahmed was working on a predictive AI tool to see if which startups will be able to better match with which VCs, and I think he's picked up on that. So in your journey in Middle East, investing in more than 180, how many of them have anything to do with AI, or were you convinced that they were actually like doing AI or machine learning or just basic logic? How did you differentiate that like hype?
I mean, a lot of them have AI in their pitch decks, but
yeah,
very few of them are actually doing any kind of machine learning. And I think sometimes what I think about when it comes to AI, particularly as it pertains to startups that we're investing in or looking at, it's whether inherent AI capabilities are necessary, or it's part of the IP or unique value that this company has, or it's just a layer of computing that everyone needs to trend towards at the right time. And AI or machine learning is meaningless if you don't have the data, because the bifurcation of AI theory from the 50s and 60s, there was maybe 99% of everybody went in one direction, and 1% of the theorists went in another direction, which is the more natural general AI, which doesn't exist today. And I think the AI we all talk about and the researchers are all working on is of the first kind, where you need a massive amount of data to learn and quantum computing to process it. That's what everyone's doing now. And I would just say that's just an evolution of computing and machine learning and building neural networks, simulating natural intelligence, but not the kind that Elon Musk is threatening, or is worried about.
General AI.
We're so far away from that kind of AI. And that's what I would call actually AI. Everything else we see engineers do, not necessarily the researchers, but just the front line, what the commercial stuff that you see, are applications that are using better machine learning than we had 10, 20 years ago. Great, that's awesome. That means that everybody at some point should evolve to have more sophisticated systems, especially as their data starts to get more complex. Ahmed and I, when he was working on the risk company, You know, we had this discussion about the project I was working at Google, where I was trying to have a meta search at Google where I can look up a company's name and I'll know which departments at Google, what account number and everything, because surprising to most people, Google did not have one central internal CRM. We had 50 to 1,000 of them. I mean, because every team implements their own CRM. It does get persisted down into the Google brain, but it doesn't come back up accessible. So we built this tiny metadata thing, but the problem is when we typed in Uber, it was just like, you know, you guys are saying, a lot of things came up when you type in Uber. It wasn't the company Uber.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty interesting problem to try to solve, and we had enough data to solve it, but that's semantic correlations and things like that, Google needs to know that you're actually looking for an entity, not every word of the mention. So that was tough, and Ahmed was working on something too, because he wanted to look for a company name or an ID and then be able to provide a risk analysis on it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I think we see it in the pitches a lot, and it's people dreaming to say, I can trade stock better because I use AI. And you're like, okay, so where are you now? We're like, we haven't launched yet. Why don't you start trading some stocks first, and then
exactly.
you can start to build some models and so on. And we see that with almost every field across all sectors. So infant level startups should not be talking about AI. And the kind of commercial AI we use now is the application layer. It's not what the researchers are working on, and it's not
exactly.
Maybe we're ahead of the researchers. I think it's the opposite. Researching is way ahead of us. The finding a way to apply that to a field.
Use cases are limited.
Yeah, that's the hard part. And then there's a whole other subject to it, which is we are not going to be, none of the startups are going to be the ones to develop the AI frameworks or the processing or anything. We just use them from TensorFlow and Watson and others. Like, so it's such a thin layer of every AI engineer in a tech company. They're just integrators of another system, right? And they're just using it to apply it to their data. So I think that's, I'm not trying to say like companies shouldn't be using machine learning. They absolutely should at the right time. But it has no effect if your data sample size is too small.
Or is too biased, or is too culture and agnostic. So training something, claiming it works in US, even doesn't work in Middle East, everything is completely different from a data perspective, bias perspective, and everything that works. And maybe, go ahead.
Can I comment on Sharif's? So Sharif, you only label AI if it's general AI or like the singularity AI. We don't know if this is possible, even in theory. So I'm not sure if I agree with you. Like there is only one type of AI, which is the general AI, and if you're not working on it, will you invest in a company that claims that it wants to create general AI?
No, but I think the point is the misuse of the term AI. It doesn't have to be general AI or singularity. It's actual artificial intelligence, the intelligence part. So we get better at computing all the time, and we're gonna get better, continue to get better, and that's I'm all for that. I've been doing that since the 90s, but like it's not going to beat us, in a way. You still control it. Humans still control it. What I was referring to is the Elon Musk doomsday. We're all in a simulator.
Yeah. So I'm really interested also in the philosophy and ethics of AI, but I don't think you should like have a binary classification of AI. If there is,
but that's Sharif's AI talking. That's not Sharif talking. So
I know. But like I know if autonomy is very important part of AI systems, like free will for us. If the system, it's easier if a system has free will to say.
Since you mentioned free will, I have to do this. I opened the conversation with like a 72 publication. I was still in cover. First
amazing.
publication of iRobot. But I mean, from Sharif, I'll jump to Aaron. And actually, Aaron's probably one of the few sectors that has enough data, enough variety, and enough use cases, which is fintech. I don't see any other, maybe except for retail, which is, I think is still, it's in infancy in terms of data to meaning conversion. How do you see AI playing out in the fintech space? Does that have some element in your investment thesis, especially in emerging markets?
Yeah, so I think we spend a lot of time at the firm trying to bridge the use cases which a lot of entrepreneurs on the ground have and understand deeply, together with like our own in-house machine learning AI sort of expertise. So we know it's really expensive for like really early stage companies to maintain a machine learning team or to maintain data scientists and things like that. And so the ability to experiment is sort of like hindered. And so we have a team of sort of 4 to 5 machine learning AI experts who like spend a lot of time in the research universe, getting best practices there. And then we have teams as well who like draw the use cases from the startup that we invest in to try and at least help them experiment a little, almost as an initial sort of like shared service machine learning team.
Okay.
And I think what happens is that you almost have a bifurcation of like entrepreneurs who are either really technical, who are building something really cool, but as we discussed earlier, might not have found like a specific actual application for it, as well as entrepreneurs who really understand the problem, but are just so scared of the other bits of technology because they don't have the internal capability to do so. So we definitely try to come in and bridge that gap. And I think that's worked out really well to at least get them experimenting so that when they do go out to raise more money, they know like what the potential, if they were to bring in more technical talent, could look like. I think you're right in that we're lucky with financial services that is a little bit more data rich. But even then, right, we are talking about, if you look at sub-Saharan Africa, like that's not as data rich as you would like because most people are still unbanked. And so where does all this transaction data sit? A lot of the transaction data actually still sits in books, right? And so the question is, how do you go back to these sort of like ledgers and digitize that or try and draw that out? That's one question. 2 would be, how do you drive the collection of more data directly to digital, right? And I think that's a lot of behavioral science and sort of like building that out as well. So I think while we're lucky in urban centers in Africa where there are more banked and there is more mobile money, for example, so there is sort of a digital footprint. So yes, that's been very interesting. But I think one danger that I've begun to see is that we are seeing a lot of digital lending startups pop up in Africa that are pulling all sorts of data like beyond your financial history, irregardless of what the regulation says or in most cases does not say.
Like much like Facebook and Google does that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, well, no, it's kind of like I think while the technical capability to try and infer some kind of like, you know, creditworthiness or repayment capability through your friendship network or through how often you say the words, how often you say more conservative words on your SMSs, like I think that's bordering on like, I don't know how ethical that is, right? And I don't know how well a predictor of it is. Yeah. It's cool to be able to say that like basis word analysis, we're able to predict repayments, but can you really and should we really?
So innovation and ethics, that's a pretty big topic. And going into risk analysis, going into what Kais, like if you're using one of his chatbots, he's probably measuring every second you're spending on the chatbot, how many words and everything. So tell us how it works.
We measure by milliseconds.
Good. So how do you actually make sure there's not just data security and compliance, but like how do you make sure the innovation in technology does not go further than innovation in ethics?
Yeah, so basically Ahmad does not have its own chatbot. We build chatbots for customers. And all this data is for customers, and some of the customers, they have their data on-prem. So we have different kind of models depending on the sector. So for banks, most of our implementations are on-prem. But it's very interesting. Yes, it's very interesting. And we only work in business related chatbots. So we never worked with
consumer.
All business consumers. So we had like last few years opportunities to work with governments wanting to analyze behavior, all of these things. We're not in this domain. So I think innovation does not give you the right to take information that is not clear that you're gonna take it. I'm not gonna use the word steal, but because
borrow.
Because sometimes if it's digital, it's okay. But for me, no. If like even if it's digital, it's the same concept. Like no one is supposed to come to your house, take things that you don't. For me, there is no boundary between digital or undigital. So I think this is a very important thing. Regulations are way behind everywhere, especially in the Middle East and Africa, because like people don't understand a lot of concept. So yeah, innovation should not be an excuse to collect data without
run amok with your data.
Yeah, this is my point.
One of the panelists in the previous session said governments are like 10 years behind in understanding what they can do with AI, what they cannot do with AI. It's like the black magic box. So in terms of maybe from a research angle as well, do you think that the governments are understanding or it's spending enough in research, which is basic research, what Sharif was also mentioning, like the understanding of the principles enough so that there will be more applications with a sound footing? How does that work, Mona?
I agree that governments are actually far behind. And one of the cases we had, they're actually even, I think them not understanding the benefits and how AI could help makes them scared to even understand how AI could help. So one of the things we had here in Palestine when the blockchain hype started and everybody was talking about blockchain and cryptocurrencies, the government forbade anyone to actually be working with cryptocurrency. And even if you look at the announcement, you're going to be laughing because like the way it was actually mentioned, it shows that they don't even understand what it is. So this is according to blockchain and cryptocurrency. So yes, I think they're scared to understand how it could help us out. And again, data is also the issue. So the government need to work more on structuring the data, collecting the data. We still lag behind on the data. So we can't even start with AI without the data itself. So this is why I think.
Yeah, Ahmad.
Yeah, I do want to jump in here. So government, I find there's kind of two interesting models. Government is not shy of adopting data, and we've seen some of that with them buying technologies off the shelf for facial recognition or whatever have you.
Yep.
But I think that there's a flip side to government being if they don't understand it, make the data public. So you do have the United Kingdom, for example, has the Open Data Initiative, right? Where almost all government data is public if it's not with some kind of clearance. So you can actually look up any company, you can look up most data, most spending, most information about agriculture and stuff like that. A lot of Western countries in Europe have started adopting this open data model. We leveraged it at my startup, right? Yeah. We benefited from these open data initiatives because as a startup, your biggest problem is if you want to go into the AI and ML space, because you have a lot of data, is you need data, right? You need data. And so we tapped into registrars, global registrars that would give you registrar information. And from there, we were able to build a lot of our solution, right? So government not understanding it is one thing, but I think government can be a good source of data if they can make that data public. In the region, in the Middle Eastern region, that's never going to be a thing. For the time being.
Well, for many places, maybe South Africa is lucky. What do you say, Kieno?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of things. If I can just go back a couple of minutes very quickly. I mean, we're talking about the definition of what AI is, and I mean, it's a suitcase definition, right? I mean, you can throw so many things in there. What is intelligence really? Once again, I just want to go back to what we said. We concentrate on the solution. I don't believe that data is indeed, or accessing data is a problem. It depends who you're working with. So not too long ago, I worked with a company that uses machine learning to help diagnose tuberculosis. getting those data sets are easy if you find the right people in leadership that can give access to them. The challenging part of that data is annotating that data. And if you don't, I mean, you can have all the data in the world. If it's not correctly annotated, you're pretty stuffed. And that was the challenge that we found. So on governance in South Africa, I've got a book here. It's written by the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, and I interviewed him yesterday on my talk show. His name is Chilitsi Marwala. He's also the Deputy Chairperson of the South African Presidential Commission on 4IR. We have a presidential commission, and that's all wonderful.
4IR?
4IR, yes. It sounds great. I see Aaron laughing there. And I agree, because if we look at what's happening in our schools, if we look at how we teach, we have a problem. And especially if you take South Africa, we can have all the high-level discussions in the world. But if we don't have skills flow, if we don't have young people that exit their final year of schooling with critical thinking, understanding people, understanding what artificial intelligence in general is, we can have all of these discussions and we're going to go absolutely nowhere. So the government responsibility goes far beyond having commissions. I mean, I know in Germany, they've got an advisory board. I mean, there's a real wicked problem, right? So if you're in a self-driving car, right? So two choices. You have to swerve out of the way of a vehicle coming in your direction. You swerve right before people on the curb, right? So
it's the famous train dilemma.
Yeah, but if we don't have the skills flow, if we don't have the people who can actually annotate the data, government needs to enable, but they shouldn't control. I do think the industry needs to take a lead. I think the industry needs to say, listen, from an ethical perspective, are we going to be like a Facebook? Are we going to make sure that teens sit in front of screens and that our models keep them hooked to those screens all the time, causing all sorts of issues? Or are we actually going to be ethical?
I'll jump to Sharif on this one. Probably Sharif started to look into more edtech companies when your daughters were stuck in front of their laptops, iPads, and phones. So how do you see education being impacted? I mean, not just because of COVID, because COVID will pass one inshallah sooner than later, but how do you see emerging technologies like AI impact the real life and real consumers, real parents with kids, or anyone in that sense?
Honestly, I don't put a lot of thought into that just yet. I think I'm worried about how screens and social and stuff impacts kids. That I'm in the middle of that. So
I know, same here.
Yeah, how do we get not just the kids, ourselves too, like get away from screens? And Social Dilemma movie comes to mind, but I think it's maybe not that evil. I just think we need a new regime for splitting time, just like we used to say work-life balance. You got to unplug on the weekend or when you're on holiday.
Yeah,
it takes discipline, and we're all of us probably are just constantly saying the same thing to our kids. It's not good. Don't be too close to the screens. Not good for your eyes. You're spending too much time on it. Like, go out into the real world. So I'm not even there on the AI part of it yet. Even just the simple algorithms that YouTube or Netflix uses when the kids start too much stuff, that shit's broken, right? Like, I remember the folks at YouTube for years trying to do a combination of machine-based and human-based filtering and tagging for the underage,
YouTube for kids.
It's really, really hard problem to solve. And so I think that's the layer, the scope of where I think at right now. I'm not even thinking about AI.
So you'll invest in a company who allows you to manage kids' phones much easily. Probably they're going to get investments from you.
Well, it's funny because I wanted to find a company like that years ago, and none of the ones out there seem to do the right thing. I want to be able to reward time for time spent doing productive things. So like if they do a math thing for an hour, they get 20 minutes of YouTube. On top of the basic stuff you see today, which is limit the time by time of day. And they only do one block. So it's like 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. What am I going to do with that? Like, that's not useful use case. And then you limit certain apps and turn them on and off. But then I just increased my amount of work managing my kids by 10 because the notifications coming in for purchases and approvals and time spent and asking for it's just
nuts.
We need to solve that problem.
So any start, Ahmed is willing to do that. Go for it.
As cliche as it sounds, I was sitting with Sharif a couple of years ago having falafel, and he was explaining to me this exact problem, complaining about how YouTube wasn't filtering the right kind of content for his kids. And it's a shock that it's still a problem, right?
It
like
is.
3 years later, it's still a problem.
Yeah, it is. I mean, now it's much worse because it's in our face now. We can't escape from it. So I'll give the last word. Yeah, go ahead, Sharif.
I mean, I'm not cynical about it. I know it's a super hard problem to solve, and I've seen brilliant engineering and product teams working on it, and it's still very hard to solve. You know?
It's I mean, my daughter is right next door. It's going to be tricky to take her, like she's on a time, like she has to be on her classes now. And every time I sneak out, she's still not sure if she's on the laptop or phone or iPad in between. It's going to turn us nuts.
I think this kind of problems will eventually be solved by combining different solutions, like people who's working on text understanding, machine vision, but if you try to say, okay, I'm gonna try to understand this content without having great machine vision and text understanding systems or algorithms, you're gonna fail. But eventually, when all of these mature, and they will mature, I believe 20 years from now, text understanding will be better than the average human text understanding. No, I'm sure about it, and same for
same here. I agree.
Yeah, machine vision. So eventually, if you have machines that can understand content in milliseconds or seconds, this problem will be
given enough time, we'll figure that out. So I'll leave the last word to Aaron. And although he's not investing in this part of the world, if you can wrap up, well, maybe with the next fund, maybe you can even co-invest with Sharif once they start fundraising. So final thoughts before we close and move to the new panel, which I have 2 duties. I want to keep here and talk more, but I also have the other panel that I need to MC. So we should repeat this again at some time soon. But Aaron, can you just wrap us up and let's go?
That's a big responsibility, but I think, Ozan, thanks for moderating a really great session. I think, we touched on everything from, real applications to real challenges to what is AI and how do we define that and what within AI we should invest in. I think we got to touch on a little bit of the exciting research and sort of groundbreaking stuff that's being done. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about how we use it and having the right sort of talent behind that to actually make that happen, which I'm sure your region are full of. So thanks, Ozan, and thanks everybody.
Thanks. You're welcome. Sharif, Mona, Ahmed, good to see you. Kammies, Kieno, nice meeting you. Aaron, thanks for a great wrap up.